In the quiet moments after a war, when cannons fall silent and borders are redrawn, a different kind of battle begins, not with bullets or bombs, but with paper, promises, and power. Long before missiles could cross continents in minutes, one nation discovered a weapon so subtle, so deeply embedded in daily life, that most of the world would use it willingly. That weapon was the US dollar. Its rise was not loud. It did not arrive with marching armies. It arrived in ledgers, vaults, and trust. To understand how the dollar became the world's strongest weapon, we have to go back to a time when America itself was fragile, uncertain, and drowning in debt. In the late 18th century, the newly formed United States was a loose collection of states, economically weak and politically divided. The Revolutionary War had been won, but the country was broke. Different states issued different currencies, trade was chaotic, and confidence was low. Then came an idea simple, yet revolutionary. If a nation could control money, it could control stability. And if it could inspire trust in that money, it could project power far beyond its borders. Alexander Hamilton, the first US Secretary of the Treasury, understood something most leaders did not. He believed that debt, if managed correctly, could bind people and institutions to the state. Under his vision, the first bank of the United States was created. It centralized financial power, stabilized the currency, and most importantly built credibility. For the first time, the world began to see American money not as paper, but as promise. But this was only the foundation. The true transformation began much later, amid the ashes of global conflict. World War II left Europe, and much of Asia devastated. Factories were destroyed, currencies collapsed, and governments were desperate for stability. The United States, however, emerged largely unscathed and immensely powerful. It held the majority of the world's gold reserves and controlled an industrial machine unmatched in history. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries gathered in a small town called Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Officially, they were there to rebuild the global financial system. Unofficially, they were deciding who would lead the world economically. The result was a deal that changed everything. The US dollar would be pegged to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Other currencies would then be pegged to the dollar. On paper, it looked cooperative. In reality, it placed the dollar at the center of the global economy. If you wanted to trade, rebuild, or grow, you needed dollars. This is where the weapon took shape. Because when your currency becomes the world's reserve, demand becomes permanent. Countries needed dollars to buy oil, food, weapons, and technology. Central banks stockpiled it. Corporations depended on it. Even rivals were forced to use it. The dollar was no longer just money. It was infrastructure. And with infrastructure comes leverage. Over time, the United States realized something extraordinary. Control over the dollar meant control over the global financial bloodstream. Transactions flowed through US-dominated systems like SWIFT. Banks cleared payments in dollars. International trade settled in dollars. If America chose to restrict access, entire economies could feel the shock overnight. This power became brutally visible during moments of crisis. When countries defied US interests, sanctions followed not with soldiers, but with financial isolation. Assets were frozen. Access to international banking was cut off. Trade was choked. Inflation surged. Governments struggled to pay salaries. The message was clear. Access to the dollar meant survival. Yet the most dangerous aspect of this weapon was not foresight, was trust. People believed in the dollar. Investors ran toward it in times of fear. During global recessions, wars, and pandemics, money flowed into US assets. This is known as the flight to safety. Even when America printed trillions of dollars, effectively diluting its own currency, the world kept accepting them. Why? Because there was no real alternative with the same scale, liquidity, and perceived safety. This created a paradox. The dollar's strength allowed the US to borrow endlessly. Deficits grew. Debt exploded. And still, demand remained. What would bankrupt other nations became manageable for America. The weapon fed itself. It's what some economists call America's exorbitant privilege. The US can buy real goods and services from other countries and pay for them with pieces of paper that it prints itself. But every weapon has consequences. As the dollar tightened its grip, resentment grew. Some nations began questioning the system. They saw how financial dependence could become vulnerability. Efforts to trade in other currencies, like the euro or the yuan, increased. Gold purchases by central banks rose. Digital currencies emerged. The world began quietly searching for escape routes. Yet escaping the dollar proved harder than expected. Because this was not just about money, it was about habits, systems, and psychology built over decades. Think about it. The entire global financial architecture, from commodity pricing to international loans, is built on a dollar-denominated foundation. To replace it isn't just about finding a new currency. It's about rebuilding the entire house. Trust, once established at a global scale, is incredibly difficult to replace. Today, the dollar stands at a crossroads. It is still dominant, still powerful, still feared, but it is no longer unchallenged. The same interconnected world that gave it strength now exposes it to risk. Overuse of financial power invites resistance. Weaponizing currency accelerates the search for alternatives. This brings us to the present moment. The rise of new economic powers, geopolitical shifts, and the advent of decentralized finance all chip away at the dollar's seemingly untouchable status. The US dollar did not become the world's strongest weapon by accident. It was built through war, strategy, trust, and timing. It reshaped global power without firing a shot. It proved that in the modern world, control over money can be more effective than control over land. The question now is not how the dollar became powerful, but how long that power can last in a world that has finally understood the weapon it has been using all along. What do you think comes next? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content.